If you're struggling with symptoms that flow from trauma in your childhood and you seek help from books or therapy or YouTube videos, there's a pretty big chance that you'll encounter a sort of trauma culture push to identify as a traumatized person and focus heavily on what happened to you and what the diagnosis might be of the people who hurt you. My father was a covert narcissist. I'm an adult child. My mom was a rage-filled codependent. And actually having a name for those things can be really helpful, and it can feel good at first. It's an acknowledgement. It's some validation that yes, what happened to you was bad and real and would likely have affected anyone, not just you. But I want to tell you why I think it's not the best idea to allow trauma to be so central to your identity or your life story. I know it's a huge deal, I know, but I'm encouraging you not to let it define who you are. Now, I always say, trauma is an injury, not an identity. You are not your trauma, you are you. And that's a really important way of drawing a line between what happened in the past and all that you can be and were meant to be. The whole point of trauma healing isn't just to feel better, but to be liberated to be your real self. And you want to hold a place for that by developing your own sense of agency. Agency is the power to make decisions and guide your own life. You didn't have that when you were a kid, and sometimes people manifest trauma with a sense of helplessness or the belief that struggles in their life today are always coming from the outside, from institutions, from bad people. But it's actually empowering to recognize that a lot of our struggles come from ourselves, our lack of ability to have boundaries against people who would hurt us, or because of problems that we create for ourselves. And I'm actually happy for you if you do recognize problems like that, because the ones you create are the ones you can change. Yay! Personally, I think clinical professionals' level of focus on the past and other people is a bit of a misappropriation of agency. Like, yes, it's there, but it's not everything. Like, you acknowledge it, but then you take it back because you can't change the past. And you have very little influence over other people, especially parents who may have abused you. Getting them to see what they did and change or apologize, it's extremely unlikely. So when you take those keys to your own healing, the place where you will focus your efforts, and you accidentally give them to past events and other people by putting most of your healing energy and focus there on them, well, you just lost your keys. By definition, that's a loss of empowerment. You can acknowledge and grieve and seek to understand what happened to you. That's part of healing. But that is really basically a door opening. It's not the final destination. You don't go, it was terrible. That's not the end. There's more to the story. There's more to the path. There's learning to heal your own neurological dysregulation, which often results from that mistreatment. Very common for people who were traumatized as kids. There's healing your disconnection from people and learning to form loving relationships. That's a path we all need to walk. Then there's the awareness of your own self-defeating behaviors and the things that you do that re-traumatize yourself or create problems in your life, and beginning to change those. And then there's freeing yourself from old trauma-driven beliefs, like, for example, that you can only heal if your parents apologize. I'm here to tell you, you can heal no matter what they do. You can heal if they've died already. And then there is coming into yourself and bringing your unique gifts into the world. That's another level of healing. That's where happiness really starts flowing. So it's a terrible shame when people get stuck in the trauma identity. People are sometimes afraid to let that go for fear they'll have no armor, no boundaries, right? Or their suffering will get the better of them. Or more often, given that we're dealing with emotional wounds that pressure you to be quiet and disappear, the trauma identity is one avenue where you get to be vocal and visible and heard and make a stink about what happened. There's that satisfaction. But I encourage you, just don't make trauma your identity. The antidote to that identity involves having a joyful life, a free life, or doing your best to build one. And it involves facing the parts of your life where you're still making mistakes, where you're possibly hurting other people, or at the very least, letting yourself down. Now, if you can't face yourself, or you deny that, like all other people traumatized in childhood, you're now quite capable of re-traumatizing yourself. We all do it sometimes. We do it through conflicts, isolating, not taking care of ourselves. We get into bad relationships, or we stay in those relationships. That's how we get stuck in trauma. When you deny that, you lose your power. What happened when we were kids and had no agency is one thing. But if you can't shift your focus on healing how you treat yourself now, how you interact with other people in the world, then in a sense, you have become your trauma. Trauma wins. Now, I know you know that you are technically not your trauma, you're a person, but you know the feeling I'm talking about, where you tell a long story about some part of your past, and you know, you were hoping that you would feel like something cathartic, but instead it makes you feel, you know, there is no resolution, there's no punchline, there's no relief, and all there is just kind of a feeling of more stress, more duress, more shame maybe even. And, you know, they make it look so easy when you see it in movies and on TV, like Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting, one of my least favorite scenes of what it's actually like. You know, he gets one little moment of validation, he cries, and then he's done, and then Minnie Driver and him, they drive off to California. Like, that's what it was. It was bad, cry. It's not like that. It's such a process. You know, it's good to cognitively realize that it happened, it's not your fault. But then there's just like such an excavation that goes on of all the lifetime of self-defeating behaviors that need to be cleared away. And then there's the cultural strangeness of when you grew up in a dysfunctional family with all the sort of strange beliefs and deceits and control mechanisms and all that stuff you need to learn as an adult. And then there's romantic relationships. That's like the final frontier. Well, not the final, but it's a high mountain to climb. And when you do get into a relationship and you have old attachment wounds and abandonment wounds, it can make you kind of have to go through all the phases of healing all over again before you can be at peace with yourself, before you can become yourself. It's a long road, but it's a happy project making your way through the phases of healing. And it begins when you disidentify with what happened to you and focus on cultivating the best in yourself. The ability to love, to be productive, to be confident, to be professional, to be thoughtful, to be successful, your spiritual growth. All of these things, they get wrecked by trauma, whether it's trauma inflicted by others or trauma that came about because of self-sabotaging behaviors in yourself. Isolating, resenting people, blaming them, living dishonestly or fearfully or selfishly. Everyone has a little of these, and most of us have one or two problems that really are hurting us and holding us back. If you feel resistant to looking at this in your life, that's okay. Maybe it's not time for you to look at this yet, but ask yourself, are you avoiding it because you feel safer in your old trauma identity? Now, I expect a few of you are going to tell me that all this talk about my role in messing up my life is victim blaming. And I used to feel the same way, but I'll tell you why. That turned out to be just more of my disempowered thinking. Anyone who was abused or neglected as a kid actually was a victim. You were. I was. And you're not to blame for what others did to you. You are not, okay? We agree on that. And I love you for living through all that. It's amazing. It's profound that you did that and kept your spirit intact. You're here now. You're like watching a video. And now your power to heal is in present time, in how you handle yourself and your relationships with other people. You were helpless in the past, but now you're the change agent. The changes are going to come from you. And I know as well as anyone that it's confusing and clunky and not a straight path trying to change your life at this level. Trauma programs you with tiredness and bitterness and confusion and helplessness and loneliness. That's all true. But working on yourself is still how healing gets done. It's not victim blaming, it's just the most practical way to make your life better. And that's what I mean when I say trauma is an injury, but not an identity. Trauma happened to you, but you are not defined by it. One of the key signs that you're off track, that you're working on the wrong problem, is that when you try to solve a problem, but nothing you do works or helps, it could be that you're working on the wrong problem. And I think a lot of traumatized people are working on the wrong problem or giving too much of their focus to it. And that's the problem of what happened in the past. It'll haunt you all by itself sometimes, whether you work on it or not. I know, but ask yourself, if you're working to heal, is it liberating you? If not, that's okay. But it could be a sign that it's time to turn your focus to your own beliefs and actions and work on that. It's very, very potent. Now, when you work on that, not only do you have the power to make some actual changes, even if they're small at first, but you get this feeling in yourself like, I can do this. This is where confidence and peace come from, when you know that whatever happens, you can trust yourself to figure it out. I'll figure it out. You'll find the part that you can change and you'll work on that. It won't be everything. You're not going to solve all your problems. You're not going to become perfect ever. Just don't worry. It's going to be such a relief just to be working on something that you can actually change. Oh my gosh, the years I spent trying to convince my mom that she should be sorry, she should be different. You know, she died when she was the age that I am now, which was terrible. But I will say that when she was gone, I was 100% clear that my healing was going to have to come from me, that there was nothing more that she was going to say or do to make it better for me. And in a way, that helped me. That helped me to kind of let go that of trying to get something out of her or from the past and just look at like, all right, what am I going to do? You know, what's going on with me? And so it was clear to me, if anything's going to change, I'll have to do it. And I did. You are so much more than your trauma. You're so much more. And that is real. When people get stuck, they can't see that. The memory of what happened can become more real to us than what's happening in present time. And what a curse that is. Because present time is where you have agency. You can quit an addiction, you can leave a bad relationship, you can learn a skill, you can heal your ability to connect with people. And I know you can't just snap your fingers and change those things, but you can take the first steps. And that's exactly how every healing journey begins. You take a step. So if you're ready to shift your identity, try these two things. One is mix it up a little. It's not terrible to talk about the bad things or think about them some, but you might want to limit it to safe and appropriate listeners and to be, make it like a finite number of minutes. So if you're with a good friend and you're reminded of a traumatic memory, maybe talk about it for 5 minutes and then make yourself change the subject. You can also decide to just mention it but not go into all the details or not mention it at all. All right, second thing to try. This is an exercise that you can do. When you find yourself getting stuck in bad memories and hopeless feelings about your past, get a piece of paper and write 2 columns on it. Draw a line down, 2 columns. And on the left-hand column, write about something bad in your past. Like for me, my mom was an alcoholic, all right? And in the right-hand column, put something from about the same time in your life that actually strengthened you. So my mom was an alcoholic, but my stepdad was not an alcoholic, and he took care of us pretty well. On the bad side, our family was poor. There was a lot of arguing about money. But on the other side, I started several businesses in my early teens, and this prepared me to be an entrepreneur as an adult, which has been really wonderful. Now, it was very hard when I was a kid. I am grateful at least that I'm really good at figuring out like how to create a service that you can charge money for. That's very helpful. So on the left side, I was neglected as a kid. And on the right, there were 2 or 3 mothers of friends who really reached out and supported me, kept an eye on me, and helped me out when I really needed it. And so when you ask me about my life, if I'm identified with the trauma, I might say, well, my mother was an alcoholic, we had terrible financial problems, a lot of fighting, and I was neglected. But when I'm identified with the positive things, my story could also just as accurately be told as, I had a stepfather who I could count on. He took good care of us. I learned entrepreneurship from some businesses I started as a kid, and this has provided a living for me all my life. And it helped that there were several adults in our neighborhood who supported me and kept an eye on my safety. So this sounds like a completely different life, right? But it's the same life. It's just another perspective on it. I don't have to lie about the bad things that happen. You don't have to cover them up. You don't have to pretend they never happened. I can keep that as a memory and as a fact and as a reference. Maybe I want to bring it up because I want to talk to you. I want to help you understand that I understand. But I don't have to focus on just the bad things, and I don't have to make them my identity. I choose to include the good things in my identity. And the more I get free from the trauma identity, the more good experiences I have to sort of tip the scales toward a positive sense of myself and gratitude for the full experience of my full life, all of it. You can try this. You'll be amazed how much you can lift your mood in the moment by just naming the good things within yourself, the good you've encountered in the people you've known and in your experiences. And in the comments section, I'd love to hear about the good things you remember. You might find that you have fear about clearing up problems in your life because other people are going to attack you for healing. And they do. So if you're curious about that, I have a video about when people don't want you to heal. You might be interested. It's right here, and I will see you very soon.